Hello, mentors. Welcome to our podcast series, Mentorships in Education, brought to you by Just Education at justeducationfirst.com. I am your host, Judith Epstein. I am very excited about the wide range of experts who have volunteered to give up their time and expertise. They will share their innovative ideas, their exciting perspectives, their rich resources, and their research with us. Please continue to delve into these topics on their websites and with your legal counsel, healthcare provider, and education professional. Our guests will have information that will be relevant to mentors supporting struggling students, parents, teachers, administrators, legal support, and health professionals. We will address all levels of education with issues that affect academic performance. Our goal is to open discussions and introduce a variety of approaches to those searching for information in a free venue. So mentors, let me introduce our guests for today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mentorships in Education. This is episode 47. I can't believe it. Visit us on YouTube and other social media, or you can go to our website at justeducationfirst.com. Check out the other topics and guests that we've had on the show over the years. So many knowledgeable people who have volunteered to give their time and to provide a free resource for you to help in your research. I would like to talk to you a little bit about our guest today, Claude Larson. She's had many, many years experience in the classroom. She's written a book where she shares her insights of her lessons and her approach to discipline issues. But mostly important, and I want to say this again, mostly important for me anyway, in reading the book, is her discussion of the power of choice. And that happens to be the title of her book. And when I'm working with kids, sometimes I tell them that they all have a superpower. And their superpower is they have the power of choice. It's so important. Welcome, Claude. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a long journey, but we made it. We made it.
Yes. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
You have been a 25-year veteran of teaching in New Jersey, the New Jersey Public Schools, primarily, as I understand, in middle school science. Claude has two core beliefs in education, and they are also her core beliefs in her life as she makes decisions. First, education can give anyone, despite their circumstances, the power to direct their future. Pretty powerful. And second, well-developed life habits have the power to give each day more value. Claude has made both large and small decisions in her life, and they've all been guided by these two principles. They're the vehicles to help you find your unique path and contribute your greatness to the world. You can follow Claude on Instagram. You can find her on LinkedIn. Her books. We've also included the links to looking for the book, and we're going to go into some detail about what the book discusses. So what I would like to start with, if you don't mind, Claude, is talking a little bit about your background and how you ended up becoming a science teacher, and what was your power of choice that moved you in this direction?
Sure. Well, I actually wasn't a stellar student in school. I never really. I'm not a big fan of like lots of rules and lots of outside influences telling me what I have to think about and what I have to do. So I came to it sort of from a different place, because some people are like, oh, I want to have the big desk and be the teacher. And I was like, I want to be the facilitator, I think, and I actually started out in a different major. I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. Um, and so there's a lot of science involved in that. And as I got into the coursework, I decided I should volunteer in facilities just to make sure that I'm, investing my money and time well. And I realized that when you go to a physical therapy setting, a lot of people are very angry, right? They've had a stroke and they need rehab and they're angry about what they've lost. And the sports people, they're angry because they can't finish out the season. And I was like, this is just not a good environment for me. And I switched course and I said, okay, what do I want? What am I going to do? And I got a summer job at a summer camp for multiply handicapped kids, actually, where I met my now husband. But the camp was, it was just incredible. Helping kids overcome and just helping them have a really fun, like, summer experience. And I realized, like, this is what I wanted to do. I liked the energy of being around young people, and I liked showing them things and just talking to them. So I switched majors and I got into education. Of course, I did love science. I still do. But I brought that with me, and it took me really to middle school. I tried younger kids. I tried high school, and I really just like the middle school kids. They're fun. You could still have impact. They're not too cool to, like, say wow or have a discovery. And I just loved, I just loved the whole thought of, oh, I can go in there and help people grow and be better.
Did you have a mentor at all in school? When you were in school or as a teacher, would you say that you had a mentor that you used for inspiration?
Well, I want to, it's funny because my cooperating teacher, so when you get your degree in education, I'm assuming most of your listeners are teachers.
Right.
So you have a cooperating teacher that you do your student teaching with. And, like, I still speak with her to this day. She was a tremendous influence. She was just super positive. I was in a middle school setting. She very rarely had student teachers because most of the people in school with me wanted the younger kids because they're cute and, they love school and they hug you and they do things and do things like that. And I just didn't have those instincts. And so she knew that when she got a student teacher, this was like a person who, like, was going to be special, and she liked science. She liked math more. So I brought, like, that to the table and we just worked so well together. And she has encouraged me to this day. So when I called her and I said, oh, I wrote a book for education, she was like, oh, of course you did. Because
wonderful.
she knew. It was like I had found what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an educator. And I know a lot of people, you go to college and you get a career out of that and they realize a couple of years in, this is not for me. And they've invested a lot of money and time and energy into something they don't follow through with. And I mean, I'm so glad I changed course because I'm a natural educator. I want to facilitate you learning. I don't want to tell you what to think. I just want to facilitate what you come to know.
A byproduct of your teaching, as we discussed, were your observations about the interaction of kids.
That's right.
And one of the observations that I think is important for you to share is this in-group versus out-group dynamic that you observed. Kids that were part of the popular group, kids that were not part of the popular group, kids that were invited to play kickball, kids that weren't invited to play kickball, and how that translated into their performance in the classroom, their social dynamics in the classroom.
Right. Yeah. So, as all educators know, your classroom comes with many personalities. all sorts of dynamics. Your period 1 class is going to be very different from your period 4 class, and just the way it is. But I think that, and what I've observed is often the kids who are more popular with their peers or perceived as more popular by the group, they tend to be really stressed out about holding on to that personality.
Oh, that's interesting.
And yeah, because if they wear the wrong thing, if they say the wrong thing, if they tick off the wrong person, that could be quite a blow to
They
their.
can fall from grace, so to
Yeah,
speak.
absolutely. Knocked right off the
Wow.
pedestal. And
Wow.
it's very
Yeah.
hard to climb back up on that pedestal once you tick off the person who has more maybe charisma or impact than you have. And I noticed that the ones who were maybe less athletic and not chosen first in phys ed, or they were maybe more introverted and preferred to read rather than talk for 20 minutes at lunch, or things like that. I think they perceived themselves as sort of like the odd duck, when the reality is, when you look out there and listen to autobiographies of people, I like to read autobiographies. So many people describe themselves as introverted and not popular when they were in school, and now they've found their passion and they're so happy. But when you're 13 and you're not popular in school, it's not landing with you that, don't worry, in time it'll be better. Like, because they're like, yeah, but now kind of stinks. So I found that by having these lessons in my classroom, the kids who perceived themselves or were perceived as more popular had a little piece of humble pie. And the kids who were viewed themselves as, not the leaders of the group, they also got a boost for their own self-worth. Rather than thinking, oh, it's all about what this person thinks. It's like, well, what do you think? Because if what makes them happy isn't what makes you happy, do you want?
So go back for a minute and tell me,
to be happy, or do you want to be happy?
Tell me, how was this something that you created in the classroom? This humble pie and a boost to their self-esteem, or how did that happen?
No, it was a byproduct, because when I'm doing these little mini lessons, right?
Okay.
That's what the book is about. It's these little mini lessons,
right?
Things like, well,
we're going to talk about those.
Attitude,
yeah,
right. But when I did those lessons, suddenly the kids who thought pretty highly of themselves were kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not so good at
that.
Right? Like, maybe I'm not perfect.
Right.
And the kids who didn't see their positive attributes suddenly were like, oh, yeah, now that I think about it and I have some self-awareness, I have these attributes that are an asset to me and to those around me, right? I don't have 100 friends, but I have like 3 solid friends. And like, that might be better than 100 likes on Instagram, because it's right here and I feel it every day. So it was a byproduct, and it just came from increasing their self-awareness.
So I've got so much to talk to you about the book, because as I will say again later, I think the book is amazing, and I love the interactive part of it. But I know that one of the issues that you address is parents who often see their students having difficulty and point the finger at the teacher or the administration. Sometimes the kids, you said, were involved in behaviors that the parents maybe didn't even know about. And often the administration, for whatever reason, is a little reticent to get involved in what's going on in the classroom. So can you speak to that for a minute and kind of segue into what you feel would be a good way to address these issues from the parent's perspective?
Sure. So, as an educator, I sat through many a conference where the parents were, my child came home and said this. And I would say, ooh, that's not a true rendition of like what actually happened, right?
Uh-huh.
This is what happened. And this is how I, run my class. This is how I ask to see their homework. Like there's no yelling, there's no shaming, there's no, oh, okay, you don't have that. Okay. And I move on. I feel like, I don't know about you, but when somebody starts yelling at me or making me feel bad, I'm never going to perform for that person again. Like they don't get any more of my minutes or my energy. So,
No.
and kids are just like that. If a teacher embarrasses them, that's not going to get the result that they're looking for. I've never understood that, but,
I forgot who said it, but one of the TED Talks I listened to, someone said that you don't learn from people you don't like. You have to like the person
right.
that you're learning from. You don't learn if all you're doing is sitting there thinking about how much you don't like them, then you're not.
Or if you think they don't like you,
or if you if they
right.
think right.
But often, right, because now I was working primarily with 8th graders, 13, 14 years old. They're going through that transition. They're getting ready for high school. They think that they should have more independence than maybe they should. But the parents are still operating on like pre-puberty mode, right? So they're like, well, my kid would never come home and lie to me. And I'm like, I don't know. A 13-year-old backed into a corner and wondering, parents wondering why their grade is a D- right now. Like they might say just about anything to get out of that hot spot, right? And so I'd have these conversations and parents some of them were very unrealistic. And they're the same ones who ironically would send me email because my first name is Claude. It's spelled like Claude because I'm French Canadian, but they're the same parents who would send me an email in March. Dear Mr. Larson, why is my child failing? And I'm like, you don't know I'm a woman, which means you haven't even had a conversation with your child. So those were the parent conferences I sat through. They wanted to blame everybody else, but they thought that their child could do no wrong.
And teachers, and from what I'm between the lines here, what I'm saying, what I'm hearing you say is that from a teacher's perspective, if there are teachers that are listening, they also need to be patient and understand that perhaps the parents are upset about something that has been fed to them erroneously. And right. They can't be mad at the parents for being misinformed.
Right.
Somehow there has to be some connection there.
And that was always the thing. I would always let them speak first. Like, you're here, you're upset, get it out so I can understand where we're going, because if I don't know what you're upset about, I can't address it.
Right.
So I always let them tell me what the problem was. I would address it. And some parents, were a bit notorious for, marching themselves into the office and yelling and, shaking their fist in the air.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I had some was like, my kid said this and you must be lying. And I would say, what benefit would it be for me to make up stories about this? One, I don't have time. I do not have the time for this. Right. And like, what's the benefit? Like, then your kid doesn't trust me. You don't trust me. This is like dysfunctional, But there were a lot of administrators who were concerned about litigious parents. And I had that thrown at me a couple times. Like, I'm going to have your teaching certificate. You shouldn't be near children. And I'm like, because I asked them for their homework and they didn't have it. And I said, okay. And I moved on. Like, I was just literally like, this is madness. But, um, I think people are lack a little self-awareness as well, especially when they see it as my child isn't doing well and they think that's a reflection on them.
So, what would be your suggestion to parents who are being told some upsetting information by their student? Um, what would be your suggestion as to how they should address the teacher? And I think we've already established that the teacher, it would be important for the teacher to assume that maybe they haven't been given accurate information. So when the teacher, and as a teacher myself, I mean, it's not something I would take personally if a teacher came in and was upset with me. But how would you suggest that a parent address something like this with the teacher so that it would end up in a productive dialogue?
Well, here's my here's exactly how I handled this. So my son, when he was in middle school, came home one day and this teacher, she just hates me and she's so mean and unbelievable, just so annoyed, so angry. And I thought, oh, okay. So before he checks out of this class, let's see what's going on. So I called the teacher and I did not email. I was like, let's hear, the voice. And I said, I said, gave no information. Like, I just want to know, in your honest opinion, how my son is doing in your class. Like, and like, no holds barred, no kid gloves, like, just tell me what's going on. I come to find out he goes to the bathroom every day and like dawdles in the hallway. He comes without his book, so he has to waste time going to his locker. He never has a pencil. He, all the usual shenanigans.
Right.
So I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and I'm going to check back with you in a couple of weeks. So my son came home. I said, ironically, how was science class? He just, of course, had no positive things to say. And I said, well, maybe you should quit spending 10 minutes dawdling in the bathroom. You should bring your book to class. You should bring a pencil. You should pay attention. And you should stop talking to the people sitting around you. I said, let's try those things. And then let's see if there's
See how it goes.
That's right. Let's see what happens. Right. And I said, and I will be checking with him, just so you know, like I didn't give him a time frame, but like turned it around because at that point it was like, okay, I got her straight story without her being like, because teachers they're going to take it personally. They're going to get defensive. They're going to be like, wait a minute, that didn't happen. As soon as they're accused, right.
Right.
Of falling short, which they're working really hard. And, so that's how I handled it.
You addressed it without putting her on the defensive.
Exactly. I said, I said, I don't need kid gloves. I just need to know how my kid is behaving in your class. Like, how is his performance? What's going on?
And that's one of the things that you said when we were talking is that sometimes parents don't understand what the behavior is in class because at the dialogue between the student and the parent obviously is pointing the finger at the teacher. So that's a great way to handle it. I really want to spend the rest of our time together talking about your book because I loved it. And it's called The Power of Choice. I'm curious, what was and I always word it this way, your aha moment where you said, oh, I need to put this in some written form. I need to organize this. There needs to be a book on this. I've looked for one. I can't find it. What was your moment where you decided this is something I have to do?
Yeah. And I ask myself that question a lot of times, like, if not me, who, if not when, if not now, when, right? So it really was one day sitting at my desk, super frustrated, Very challenging group of students that year, very immature. Discipline was leaving me with just like a stiff neck every day because they had impulse control issues. They could not let me finish a sentence without interrupting. Literally, I had to say to my class, sometimes I inhale and I can't speak and inhale. You have to give me a second.
Oh my God.
They were unbelievable. And it was like maybe like February time. And I said, oh my gosh, I've seen no growth. It's February. What am I doing? I'm losing my mind. What I have to do something else. So I, did a little searching, like, what are my habits that I wish they had? And I went home and I jotted on a sticky note, like, I'm going, and I said to myself as a science teacher, this is an experiment. This could fail. I could fall on my face. This could be really embarrassing. Oh, well, I can't go home with pain in my shoulders anymore. And so I said, for 10 weeks on Monday, I'm going to discuss life topics, like the universal truths, the habits that you need to be a successful adult. I'm going to address this. These kids are sorely lacking. And I went in that Monday, and every class I started with this. I did like a 2-minute little meditation that I had learned. And then I went into like my lesson of like the power of your thoughts, right? And you can choose to put in your best effort or you can choose not to, right? Like, and it was 10 minutes long. And everything I did after that, they put in their best effort. It was the most remarkable day because I'm anticipating the face plant, like, oh, this could fall on deaf ears. And then the following Monday, I did the next lesson and the next and the next. And when I got to week 10, I said to them, guys, I'm so happy. I mean, I saw dramatic improvement, dramatic. Like they stopped interrupting me. My discipline problems went from like 100 per class period as far as, and I don't mean like, there was no fights breaking out, but just like, can you sit down? Can you stop that? Can you please listen? Can you stop interrupting? It went from 100 to like 2. I couldn't explain it because I was just like, this is remarkable. And by week 10, I said, well, this was my 10th. I know you guys weren't counting. I was counting. And they're like, what do you mean? We're not going to do this every Monday? And I was like, do you want to do it every Monday? Yeah, we want to do this every Monday. The kids I never expected, the kids who wouldn't say boo in my class, the super quiet kids, they were like, no, I love this. And I was thinking, wow, I was pretty sure you didn't love my physics and chemistry lessons. You love this, right? So, okay, I'm going to give you more of this. So it finished out the year. And the following year, I said, why would I wait till I'm frustrated and it's February? I'm going to start this in September. And I did one a week, right through to the last week of school. You miss a couple weeks because there's like standardized testing, which we all have. And,
there's holidays and other
crazy weeks. But, and I think the last couple of days of school is like, graduation for 8th graders, like that's not the week to sit them down and do this.
Right.
But I did all these lessons and I want to say maybe 4 or 5 weeks in, well, honestly, other teachers were coming to me and saying, I don't know what you did in your class, but the kids are talking about it in my class. And then the phys ed teacher.
What a compliment.
I know, right? Well, part of them were like, I couldn't get my lesson started. I'm like, oh, sorry. But then when the phys ed teacher said they're talking about this in the locker room, I said, oh, okay, that's something. And then when the cafeteria aide saw me in the office and says, I don't know what you're doing, but they were all talking about it at lunch. I'm like, at lunch, you could talk about anything you want. And you're talking about what I did in my class. That's crazy. And that's when I said, okay, I'm on to something here. So then one of my colleagues said, I know you're retiring in a year. whatever this is, I want it. I was like, oh, okay.
That's when you
So
decided to write a book.
I started doing voice memos. Oh, I'll just record these and then she can listen to them and she can make it whatever she wants, blah, blah, blah. And by the third or fourth one, I was like, holy cow, this is a book. I got to write this. Because it was so transformational. And as difficult as the class was that I started this with, the following year, that group of students was just touted by every grade level before them as like one of the most difficult groups they had ever of all time. And it ended up being a really great year with them because out of the gate, like I gave them a week or two to settle into school routine. And then I just started doing this every Monday. And the amount of self-awareness and personal growth that I saw was so remarkable.
So in your opening, you write 2 lines I'm going to read. Okay. The chapters aren't about any of the latest trends. In fact, these ideas are old school and timeless. How you apply them to your life will be as unique as you are. And then I scroll down and you have about 30 lessons. They're all interactive. But what's the title of the first one?
Your Dirty Mind.
That's right. Your Dirty Mind. I'm thinking, what is she teaching them? Where is this going? So, of course, I had to read it and see what it was all about and see what the activities and so forth were. Do you want to? I think that was just a genius move on your part to the title, the material that you cover, and the wonderful interactive lessons, templates you include in there. So you have 30 of them. I've written down about 6 or 7 that I particularly like, but I'm going to let you talk a little bit about some of those. And if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in here and there.
Absolutely. So as I said, on my sticky note, I went home, I said, oh, these are the topics I want to talk about. But I know my audience because this is not my first trip to the rodeo. So I said, how do I get their attention? And I, had some good structure in my classroom. And every day when they came in, all eyes, the habit was you read the board. Because if the first thing is, put your homework in the tray, that's the first thing you're doing. And if the next thing is you read until you get to the point where you're like, well, this is the point where some instruction will be required, right? So first thing I wrote right on my board, I was like, I need to grab their attention. So I said, the first thing we're doing, topic, : your dirty mind.
I love it.
Every kid whoa, right? And then the next direction was take a piece of blank paper off the front table. So there they were sitting with their blank paper, like, wow, what am I going to be writing on here? And it really turns out that the lesson is your mind is a pile of dirt and what you plant there will grow and what you water will grow. So if you have negative thoughts and you worry and you gossip and
you feed it,
you keep feeding it, you're throwing fertilizer on there and you're watering thoughts. That's what grows. If you notice things to appreciate and say thank you, if you have positive comments to make, then you water that and it grows. But the fact, because honestly, 8th graders, it can be hard to hold their attention. I feel like you can have a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old, you're going to have the same conversation. But I just knew that I had to take it from the teenage perspective, and anybody who works with that grade level knows they can be a little self-absorbed. So
No,
yeah, I
you've
know.
got to be the first person to say that. I've never heard that
Nobody
before.
ever noticed. Nobody ever noticed till me. But yeah, and that's why, I mean, some of the chapters, things like, have you ever felt unappreciated? It's all about like you expressing gratitude to others, right? But how do I get them to buy into my chapter? Have you ever felt unappreciated? They're like, I sure have. And they think it's going to be all about them.
One of the things that I
And
love about the book is that I'm a behavior remediation coach. All of my training is in cognitive behavioral therapy, and functional contextual therapy, and uh, and DBT. All of these have in common being aware of your thoughts, being mindful of your thoughts, being metacognitive. If we say thinking about thinking. And what this book does that I love is that in the privacy of their own space, they can write. It's almost like a diary. They can write some very personal thoughts. And that's what I thought of when I was looking at it, while you as the teacher are up there directing the process. What they're writing is private. They don't have to share it with anyone. They don't have to get up in front of the class and read what they've written. It gives them an opportunity to really think about it. And I would imagine at the beginning, some kids have difficulty they might flip it off and don't take it seriously. Please tell me if I'm wrong, but as they went through it, I bet it began to feel very cathartic for them.
And I'll tell you that I thought that as well. I said, and that was my, that was my risk. Like
Yes.
they could hate this. They could not want to do this.
Oh, I'm not saying hate it. I'm just saying not take it seriously.
Right. But it was the tone I brought to it.
Okay.
Like, we're going to clear our desk. We're not, or, they sat at tables, going to clear our table. And I said, I don't want you to talk to each other about this. I don't need you to share it. This is your own business.
Okay.
Like right out the gate.
Right from the beginning.
I'm not reading this. I'm not collecting this.
Right. You're not going to get graded.
Right. You don't have to write in full sentences. Like that was
right. No spelling.
Right. I don't care about spelling. I don't care if it's bullet points. I don't care if it's a phrase. I don't care if it's a word. Like this is, this is yours. I'm never going to see this. You can write and so that appealed to the kids who might have wanted to write, words that weren't appropriate for school. Okay. But if your life is in that place, then that might be the word that you use to describe what your biggest problem is, I'm
going to jump to chapter 5.
Okay.
Because, of course, the title of that being the age that I am, brought back nice memories. The title of it is All You Need Is Love. And, for me, it was very retrospective, thinking about the Beatles and the songs and so forth. And I'm wondering what you could do with that chapter, and in looking at the discussion that you talk about and how you have the kids writing about what they love and things that they are aware of, and really thinking about this topic and how it applies to them and what they feel might be missing from it. You go to the next one. The next chapter is, how do you want to suffer? I'm thinking to myself, want to suffer? What does she mean by that? How is she going to expand on that? How are the kids going to feel when she asks them, how do you want to suffer? I just want to throw out a couple of them. There, in chapter 28, you talk about life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And to me, that kind of says everything about the title of your book. To me, when I was looking at that. That's kind of brings it into focus as to where we've been going, how important choice is. And bad things happen to all of us, but it's how we react to it that makes the difference. And it's about the choice we have as to how we're going to react. And there are 30 lessons here, and each one of them is like a brick in the wall. Each one of them builds the strong foundation. I don't know if you would agree with me, but as I was reading through it, to me, it was really important that they be followed, because each one builds on the next, not jumping around. Would you agree with that?
That's how I set it up. Like you have to have sort of an easy entry. And then the next one is you go a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper. And they are, because in the beginning, they're not really sure where this is going. But after a few weeks, it's like they trust you. Like the level of trust from September, I would say I started maybe the second or third week of September doing this with a class. From that point to a couple weeks into October, it was all it took. And then they were kind of like, oh, she's never going to read this. She's never, like, nothing bad happens. Like I can read anything. I can just think my thoughts right now. And they knew, because I'd write, and I didn't use the same titles that are in the book, because obviously when I wrote the book, it was different than my sticky notes, let's face it. But I'd always put a question up on the board or some sort of like phrase, and they would be already like, how do you want to suffer? And they would just be like, I don't. Well, it's not a choice. That wasn't the question.
Right.
But, just stuff like that. And I just grabbed their attention. But you have to start, like your dirty mind. Oh, she's going to be talking about something that I want to know about.
Right.
And once they bought in, then they would read those questions. And it was you could see the self-awareness beginning before I even said one word. They were already thinking about whatever that question was.
What's the monk story?
Oh, the monk, that's just about holding grudges. So, and I'll tell you a story about that, but it's, and some of these were really classic stories that have been told for, probably centuries. But it was just, two monks are walking along. They come across a woman in distress. In the morning, it was a stream, and she crossed it and went to where she needed to go. And now, I guess it had rained, and it's a river, and she can't get across, and her child is going to be alone, and she doesn't know what to do. She's distressed. She's crying. And so one monk says to her, what's the matter? And, she explains her story, and he carries her across the river. And the other monk doesn't say a word, doesn't carry her across the river, gets to the other side. They go their separate ways. And the monk who did nothing is angry and getting angrier. And finally, he says to his fellow monk, we've been told not to speak to women, and we've been told never to touch a woman. And you did both. And the monk says, I put her down a half an hour ago, and you're still carrying her. And it was just like, yeah, how long are you going to carry that for?
Right.
And just hold, because some kids, and I think it's like in my nature, I'm just not a grudge holder. I like to describe it as I have the gift of a very short memory. So I just don't hold grudges. And I know there are people who are like, I'm going to hate him forever because he did this. Like, okay. But really it comes down to, in the same situation, somebody did something that you wouldn't have chosen to do. That, like, they made a choice you would have chosen differently. And now you're going to dislike them for it. But it was just one choice in a million choices that they're going to make in their life. And they start to realize that they are holding grudges and that maybe they should put those down because it was one choice and that they don't need to carry that for the rest of their lives. And I actually had a student, and this would often happen. I would do this mini lesson, really, 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning of a class. And then I'd go on with whatever I had planned for the day, which I got through beautifully because they were even more engaged than they might have been had I not started out with some mindfulness here. But often it would happen that I'd have a kid who would linger after class. They'd drop their books or their pencil, or they'd just appear unorganized, and they'd say to their friends, "Oh, go on ahead. I'll catch up with you. I can't get it together today," whatever. And I had one of my students came to me and said, "My father hasn't spoken to his brother in 10 years. And my uncle tried to take his own life 10 years ago. And my dad can't forgive him. He's still mad." So I said, "So now what do you know?" And she says, "My uncle thought that was his only choice. And my father wouldn't have made that choice." I'm like, right. She went home and had that conversation with her dad. Mm. I'm like, this is powerful. I mean, she can't, the fact that she shared it with me.
Yes.
I was like, okay, so now you have a choice. What do you do with this information? And she was like, "I'm going to go home and talk to my dad." Oh, okay. And I'm like, I have no idea if this is going to happen or not going to happen and how it's going to be received. And so, hoping there won't be an email or a phone call about it. But honestly, like she was like brave enough to bring that up. And, they know these things about their family, and they often feel powerless about making any change or having any impact. Yes. Whereas, just a little bit of awareness, maybe for her dad, maybe that made a difference. Maybe, maybe they're communicating. And if they're not communicating, then at least maybe he's not holding the grudge. Hard to say, but that it was just that was the kind of impact that like kept me going, because sometimes I was never sure, like, oh, should I keep going? Should I keep going? And then one of the kids would little, handwritten thank you notes left on my desk on my blotter from 14-year-old boys saying thank you for doing this.
Oh my gosh. That
goes in the save it folder.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
even I had one student who was his house. I can't even imagine what it was like to live in his house. I mean, his parents were about as absent as they could get, and if they weren't absent, they were angry. Like those were the two, ends of the pole there. But he was not doing well academically, and he was angry is what he was. Every response that came out, anything you asked him to do, "Hey, could you do me a favor and do this? What do you want me to do that for?" I'd be like, "Okay, you don't have to. I was just hoping you'd help me out. It's fine." Like, he was angry, and he did these lessons. Like, he would sit there with that piece of paper and become self-aware, and he started to realize that his future did not have to look like what he was currently living.
As bleak as what, right?
Exactly. Like, you have a choice. You don't have to behave the way your parents did. Like, you can learn that how you feel around your parents, and you can do things differently, right? Going forward.
You told me that on Mindful Mondays, your attendance was higher than it was the rest of the week, or that it had ever been on Monday before. Yes. Monday was a day when everyone seemed to make sure that they were there to be able to participate. I have an expression that I use all the time. It's called "you snooze, you lose." And it's because I love chocolate. And so I get Ghirardelli bars of chocolate and I put them in the freezer. And my husband knows they're there. And sometimes he will go to get one and they're gone. And I say to him, you snooze, you lose.
Okay.
That is not how you use the phrase, though.
No.
You use the phrase also. How do you use the phrase?
So for me, you snooze, you lose is hitting the snooze button on your alarm,
Mhm.
which phones, you can disable your snooze button on your phone. A lot of people don't know that. It comes as a default. And I'm like, yeah, the people making this phone are literally like, hey, this is a phone for procrastinators and people who don't want to start their day. So we're going to just leave the snooze on. I'm like, you can turn that off. You can make it not an option. People
Right.
don't know. You can go in settings and do that. So I have this whole conversation with them. How many of you do hit the snooze button? And I'm like, it primes your brain to make excuses for the rest of the day.
Right.
You know, oh, if I don't have to get out of bed for 9 more minutes and then 9 more minutes. Oh, and some of them say, oh, I hit the snooze alarm 3 times and then I get out of bed. I'm like,
Right.
why don't you just get solid sleep and then get up at whatever time
Right.
you're getting up?
Right.
Like I was literally like, oh, this is a warning. I'm going to have to wake up soon. Oh, wait, this is another warning. I'm going to have to wake. I'm like, oh, the mindset. So yeah, they just do it and it becomes a habit. And I'm like, what's the reward for your habit? You know, like, how is that rewarding you? Like, how do you feel good when that goes off or not, you know?
Right.
But yeah, and it was just how to set yourself up to not procrastinate.
So when you talk about all you need is love, we didn't really mention this, but I want to mention you're not talking about love of the love of people in your life. I believe you're talking about self-love.
Yes.
And you're talking to the students about how they can be aware of their strengths and not just focus on the areas that they need to develop. I don't like to use the word weaknesses. It's more areas that we need to develop.
Yeah.
And you have so many lessons like that, like I like me not, which is so cute, and beware of vampires and get out of control. And there are many, many of them. I wish we had more time to go into them. You have also, as I understand, put out a teacher's edition to this book. Is that correct?
I did. And I'll give you like a, quick example. So one of the topics is excellence, right? So what's excellence? We all recognize what excellence is. We all know that when we're putting in an excellent effort and when we're not. And I talk about that, but in the teacher's edition, for every of the 30 lessons, the 30 lessons appear in their entirety. And then there is an extension activity that you can do with your whole class that keeps you on the same topic, but they have to share no personal information. So, for example, excellence. I would put a line down the board, and on one side you write never, and on one side you write always. And everybody gets 2 sticky notes. What's something excellent people never do? What's something excellent people always do? You don't write your name on it. You just write your answer on the sticky note, put the sticky note on the board. We're done. And then we talk about, oh, they never complain. They never blame others. They never, they never lie about their mistakes. These are like student generated responses. It's not adult, like they know, right? And they write that down. They always listen to me when I have something important to say. They always, help me when I'm struggling. Like, and it comes down to like, do any of these things cost money? No. Are you capable of doing these things? Yes. Like, are you capable of being excellent? Okay. You recognize what excellence is. You obviously know somebody who has these traits, or that's why you wrote them down. And so now you're extending this conversation, but instead of just that one kid's perspective, you have an entire class's ideas. And that it's just like opens up their minds.
Exactly. That's what it does.
And it's free. Like excellence is free if you want it, And they start realizing that it's not about, oh, excellent people have a lot of money, because nobody wrote that. Like,
Right. Right.
excellent people they learn what they need to so they can be really good at what they do.
Or excellent people have the best fashion sense.
Yeah, nobody says that. And if they do, that's an outlier. Maybe that's an outlier, like, oh, well, you have a high regard for people who care about how they dress.
Right.
Right.
That's
so,
okay.
And that's your perspective, and that's fine. There's a whole industry for that. Like, you should look into it.
I'm sorry. Do you feel that parents could use this teacher's edition in working with their kids at home if teachers are not using it in the school?
Oh, I totally think that if they used the 30 chapters as conversation starters,
right? That's what I was thinking.
How great would that be?
Like around the dinner table at night.
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking. I wanted to kind of just put it out there and see if you put a thumbs down. But I was thinking, if parents, sometimes it's hard to have a conversation with your student at the dinner table. What did you do today? Nothing. How did it go? Fine. Right. So if they were to get the book, the teacher's edition, and they were to talk about your dirty mind, the first lesson, right. And the parent was to say, really great conversation. I got you a copy of the book. If you feel like filling it out, why don't we make this a journal? It's your journal, and we can talk about the chapters, and you can kind of do the stuff on your own.
Right. And then
some ideas.
And then the teacher's edition is like the dinner table extension. So without them having to share what they may have journaled in the book, now you can have that extended conversation about, gratitude, or, I'm a big journaler. I have several journals. I have one in the morning. I have a gratitude journal. I have, inspiration journals for my art, for my artwork. And I'm just a huge fan of it. But I think the art of conversation is dwindling, one, because they're 13 or 14 and some of their responses are monosyllabic grunting, and you're kind of like, okay, at least I got something. But it needs to be fostered. It needs to be nurtured, and it's done by the parents. The reason a lot of these lessons came into being was maybe it wasn't happening at home, and I know for a lot of kids it wasn't.
And it may not have been happening at home for any other reason than the parents didn't know how to bring these topics up without them being confrontational. So this book and its accompanying teacher's edition may be what parents could use to help them, to guide them, to give them some direction, which is what these podcasts are all about, to give them some direction, to have some dialogue with their children, because it's often hard to get that dialogue going.
And I think that was probably my, from my perspective, what did I do? I chose to be an educator. Who did I choose to educate? 13-year-olds. Like, not a lot of people are going to say, give me 100 13-year-olds. That's who I want to talk to all day. Like, not, because it's a tough age and they don't want to share, and they have a lot of feelings and personal ideas. They don't necessarily want to give them out to you. And parents have an investment on what the answer is to the question they ask. Whereas I am like, no, I need you to make your answer personal to you to help you grow in the direction that you feel is important, as opposed to a parent tying their self-image to it and saying, well, yeah, but I want my child to think this way or that way. This is the conversation starter. Now you see where your kid's coming from.
Right.
Because how many people have said, I can't even talk to my teenagers. It's like they're from another planet, or they think, and of course, teenagers think their parents are so dumb. They don't know anything. They have, life experience counts for nothing when you're 13, but it's just such a good conversation starter. And those are the conversations that people that I do not know have left me reviews on Amazon saying just that. Like, I wish I had this, and, oh, this helped my wayward son. And, things like that.
And parents and teachers are not judgmental. If a conversation is going on about a particular topic, it's about listening to what the kids have to say and trying to move the conversation along with positive inquiries and validation, and not about what are you saying? That's ridiculous, because that's going to just shut everything down. So
that's right. And that's what's nice about the questions. They're super open-ended, and it gives them, because let's face it, you're getting up, you're getting everybody out, maybe you're working a full-time job, you're getting dinner on the table, you got a lot to think about. Are you also sitting down thinking about what are some open-ended questions that I could mindfully ask to get at the core of what they're thinking in their 13-year-old mind?
Right.
Like, no, because the questions are like, do you have any homework?
Right.
Did you get that done?
Right.
Is there anything I need to sign for school?
Don't forget to study for your test.
Exactly. Like the practical conversation. But the deeper ones that's what changes the relationship.
Right. It does. I want to thank you so much for being with me. This has been a struggle to get going. That seems to be what's happening lately. Everyone is so busy that we get changing things around, but we finally got it together. It's been a pleasure to work with you. I thank you so much for your enthusiasm, Claude. And I want to point out to our listeners that we have tabs on the podcast, which will let them know where her book is, where the teacher's edition is coming from. There'll be some pictures so that you can recognize these things. You can read more about her on the bio tab. And certainly if you have any questions or concerns, you can find her on LinkedIn. That website. Yes.
I was going to say, I have a website. I don't know if I sent you. Maybe I could send.
Well, send that to me.
There's a contact me form right on there.
So okay, you can contact her and ask her some questions. I know she'd be happy to get back to you with any answers. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Enjoy the holidays with your friends and family. Stay safe and keep connected.
Thank you, mentors, for being with us today. If you found this podcast of value, please visit justeducationfirst.com to subscribe to our blog and Mentorship and Education podcast so that you may continue the exploration with us. Our goal is to provide a free treasury of information for our listeners so they can become acquainted with the amazing resources that we have available to us. We want to thank all of our guests for giving their time and sharing their wealth of information with us. Please also visit their websites and explore more of their resources to further your pursuit of the topic. Hope to hear from you at justeducationfirst.com. Have a good week, and thank you.